Welcome everyone to the 17th Education and Development Conference. We are very excited about the panel discussion that we are having today on the topic of the power of technology and impactful ways to use it. We have great panelists and insightful professors, professionals, and students who have joined us today, and we will dive right in. Let me first briefly introduce our great panelists. So Professor Fabiana Diniz Kurtz de Silva. She holds a PhD in Education in Sciences from Regional University of the Northwest of the state of Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil. She also works as a professor in the Languages, Linguistics, Literature course, and holds a sandwich PhD in ICT in Education at the University of Lisbon with CAPES grant. She also holds a master's degree in Applied Linguistics from Federal University of Santa Maria, where she also completed undergraduate degree in Portuguese English. She has an experience and works in the area of teacher education with an emphasis on digital information and communication technologies in education, online education, applied linguistics, English teaching for academics purposes. Welcome, Fabiana. Dr. Hiroyuki Obari is a professor emeritus at Aoyama Gakuin University. He now teaches part-time in the Faculty of Law at Waseda University in Japan and in the Tokyo Institute of Technology Graduate School. He has been a visiting researcher at the National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology since 2006. Dr. Obari received his BA from the University of Oklahoma in the Political Science, MA from the ICU in International Relations, and a second MA from Columbia University in TESOL. He also holds a PhD from the University of Tsukuba in the Computer Science. He served as a visiting researcher at the University of Oxford. Professor Obari specializes in COL, TESOL, World Video Studies, and Education Technology. Welcome, Dr. Obari. Klerr, Marris Ababon, is working as a support officer of an educational technology company. She claims to be a teacher by profession and by heart. She took up her bachelor's degree in education with major in English at Holy Cross College of Kalinan in the Philippines. After graduating, she became an English teacher for 2 years and another year to Malayan colleges of Mindanao, where she taught English, human philosophy, capstone, and empowerment technology. However, the urge to explore more of her skills was the reason why she decided to take another leap. She is still teaching, but on a different platform, because today, as a support officer at Quipper, Philippines, she is able to help her co-educators as well as learners in these times of pandemic. And our students who are joining us today are from the University of Toronto, Scarborough. Sorry if I mispronounced this. Maero Adelante is a registered nurse in the Philippines and in Ontario, Canada. She graduated Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Central Escolar University in Manila, Philippines, and completed her certification in Acute Complex Care Nursing and Coronary Care Nursing in Ontario, Canada. She currently works as a lecturer and clinical instructor for personal support worker students in a private career college in Toronto. She is also an undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, with a major in health studies, double minor in psychology and health humanities. Welcome, Olivia. James Muscat is a fourth-year student at the University of Toronto. He is pursuing a major in history and a double minor in political science and literature and film studies. Outside of school, James enjoys watching and playing football, playing video games, and watching YouTube videos. Welcome, James. Maria Haque is a fourth-year student at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. Her areas of study include English literature, historical studies, and international development studies. She enjoys learning about different fields of studies, as it also provides the opportunity to engage with people with various interests. She loves creating shared memories with peers through hobbies such as art, creative writing, community volunteering, and gardening. Welcome, Maria. So let's just dive right in. I would first like to ask students, because I did have a very interesting conversation with them prior to this panel discussion, to share quickly how did this pandemic, since we switched to the virtual teaching, how did this virtual environment affect you personally? What are the opportunities and benefits that you see, and what is that you are missing in this virtual environment? So let me start with Maria Haque.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, first of all, and thank you to everyone that's here. So with virtual learning, it's been a roller coaster in terms of just emotions and even getting the grades that I was hoping to get. On the one hand, it's been amazing to have the opportunity to make it a lot more accessible, and of course to keep everyone safe. It's something that has felt almost like a community effort to keep everyone safe while at the same time continuing our own journeys. Oh, sorry about that. Is this better?
Yeah, we can hear it.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so on the one hand, it's been a lot more easy to access, but of course, I feel like there's a element of community that's missing. For example, I'm not really able to see my friends or my classmates or professors, and in that sense, I'm losing out on that personal environment that we would have created otherwise. But I think overall, through Zoom calls, breakout rooms, we've been able to really connect through a shared experience of this pandemic. And even on top of that, I think professors have gone above and beyond to try to make a virtual classroom feel like in-person classrooms. So for that, it's been really comforting. Yeah, and I think that's been my general experience.
Great, thank you, Maria. James, would you share your experience?
Yes, I'd love to. So yeah, just to start off, it's actually kind of interesting because for me, I have ADHD. So in some ways, I actually benefited more from an academic standpoint, just from learning. From my personal experience, I noticed that there were a lot less distractions for me. And so I just found it a lot easier just to focus on the actual material from the professor rather than seeing like a lot of distractions within a maybe like a 100 plus room lecture hall. And it's actually really interesting because even when I talk to like my friends who don't have ADHD, they had a little more difficulty with concentration. But I also noticed that when I talk to my friends who have ADHD, they actually seem to be more on the same page as myself, and they actually they benefited more on the academic standpoint. But I think Maria made a very good point, and I just wanted to like echo that as well with the social standpoint as well, because of course with the pandemic, the most of the time we're either like in our homes, so it could be like very isolating. And part of the university experience, I think, has to have a balance between like the social aspect and also the academic aspect as well. So although I personally, I think I benefited from the academic standpoint, I think we all missed out on the social aspect.
Absolutely, James. Thank you. Mira?
Hi, everyone. So when it comes to the change from in-person learning to online learning during the pandemic, from someone who's trying to juggle school and work, I kind of benefited when it comes to the timing. Say, for example, instead of commuting, I can use the time to just study for another lesson that I'm going to take. So that's one thing with time, or you can have an extra hour of sleep instead of preparing in the morning because you have to travel to school. And another thing I found that was helpful was because the lectures were recorded, if there are some concepts that I would like to go back to, say I did not really get it the first time that my professor explained it or discussed it, so I can replay all those sessions and then try to make notes, and at least, I would be able to learn it better. However, one challenging thing is that compared to in-person learning where I can ask my professor right away, like during a classroom discussion. So that connection is something that I kind of missed because we are behind the screens and we don't, professors would usually turn on their cameras, but some students would not. And sometimes you feel like you don't really know what your other classmates are doing. Are you all engaged, or are you just behind the screens doing whatever it is that you're kind of doing? So yeah, that connection with people is one thing that I really miss. But then I wouldn't say that it's totally negative because there are other benefits that I got from it. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Maero. So I want to twist this question a little bit and ask you, Obari, from the perspective of an educator, what challenges have you faced and what possible benefits did you notice when you switched to the virtual teaching setting? You have to unmute yourself, Obi.
I'm very sorry. Yes, just let me share my experience. I've been teaching online, not in person to person for 2 years, but I think there are many advantages that I could use, on an online lesson. First is the, I usually use a sort of ICT software to assess the student performance, like peer-able, so I could give some immediate feedback with a smartphone and whatever. And another thing is VR or XR, I started using that stuff. And maybe VR could help us to interact, just like as if we are talking to the person, And so that's a second thing. And maybe I frequently invite some foreign scholars and also the Campus Crusade members to come to my virtual classroom from the United States. So the student had a great opportunity to increase the sort of, they could interact a lot, And I have been using a sort of a COIL, collaborative online international learning between my university and the National University of Singapore. I carried out a sort of a COIL, or intercultural exchange, so the student could be more culturally sensitive, to understand the cross-cultural issues. And however, I start to wonder, student could develop a sort of empathy or heart-to-heart communication with ICT in society 5.0, So that's what we have to overcome that, But there are many, many advantages to use online Zoom lessons, I think that'll be all. So,
thank you so much, Obi, for bringing up very important points that I will come back to you shortly for that. But Fabiana, what I would like to ask you, what challenges or benefits have you noticed in teaching in Brazil in the virtual environment?
Yes, hello everyone. It's very, very good to be here. And you know that yesterday we had a very important oral presentation here where we could try to share some experiences here from Brazil in terms of what we understand as cyber culture and its reflections or its consequences to face-to-face learning and even e-learning process, especially during a pandemic context or maybe a post-pandemic context. And you know that I agree with you here, guys, and here at UNIJUI, and of course, we have different scenarios within Brazil, and when we talk about different countries and different experiences, but you know that several of these aspects that you were mentioning here, and I'm pretty sure that people who are watching us now and will watch later share the same feeling, that especially for educators, the feeling when it comes to something new, it's fear. You fear that, so you don't know actually how to explore that. As one of you mentioned before, this personal contact, this eye-to-eye feeling, and it's pretty much different when it comes to an online learning. But as Professor Obi mentioned before, there are several potentialities in terms of educational process or pedagogical process when we are talking about technology. And since technologies are human creations to solve human problems, my question is, why is it so difficult to consider these resources in education? And we know that when it comes to geographical issues, and here at UNIJUI we have several students who don't live in the same city, they have to travel to come here, so technology almost saved them to not to lose classes and to participate and actually engage within their educational process. So I believe that we could explore more here in our panel these potentialities and of course limitations. Thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Fabiana. Klerr, as a support officer at Quipper Philippines, I'm curious to the point that we already discussed. What is that you in Quipper Philippines consider when you develop technology to support the needs of teachers and students? Because I believe that there are some different specific needs on both sides and expectations.
Yeah, thank you. By the way, hello from Hola from the Philippines. And I think I would like to answer that question or share my perspective as really a third person who really sees our clients in Quipper maximizing our platform in the conduct of their online classes. So with regards to the last later questions, how did our LMS really benefit our teachers? Well, for our basic education teachers, well, as part of our services, we provide them a ready-made content crafted by content experts around the country. And we really highly assure that these contents are highly aligned with the Department of Education standards, all the MELCs, and more than the alignment, our content is highly contextualized according to the Philippine setup, of course, to really check relevance. And since we already have our ready-made content, for example, we have ready-made lesson plans, lessons, worksheets, presentation decks, curriculum maps, performance tasks, rubrics, assessments, and all other relevant resources available in the platform, our teachers have more time in doing more fruitful monitoring and feedbacking, since we have given them a great option to have a less lesson preparations. And not to really mention, our system has automated checking of objective types of assessments, whether it's from our ready-made content or those which created by them. Now, for the second question, I would like to answer what are the challenges really that they actually face. I mean, not all teachers are tech savvy. Not all teachers too can put their creativity into technology. And that is where we in Quipper provide intensive support to our clients. And when I say about intensive, I mean about having a lot of crash course trainings, one-on-one platform trainings, doing online support whenever they need us, and also providing them pedagogical trainings, like providing them workshops about managing strategies in online classes, creating higher order thinking skills assessments, mastering online tools such as Zoom or Google Meet and the likes, and many more. So with these aids, Quipper as their LMS provider may really give our educators room to professionally grow and be motivated to cope with such adversities.
Absolutely, thank you, Klerr. You brought up the point that I want to discuss with here with other panelists as well. But before I do that, Fabiana, we were talking here about how the technology changed interactions with between students and teachers, but also between colleagues and between students themselves. But I guess but my question here is in this regard, how do you think that technology from the perspective of an educator impacted the learning outcomes of the students? We did hear from them that it gave them the opportunity to actually be more efficient and to learn more and to organize their time more efficiently. But that's from their perspective. What have you noticed from your perspective as a teacher in Brazil?
Yes. Thank you, Vladimir. It's something that we are always discussing here, actually, in our group of educators in the university itself, because I think this is one of the most important challenges when it comes to education. And when it comes to challenges or even dangers in terms of that, I think the outcome, it's pretty much, it has some contact points, you know, some similarities when we are talking about face-to-face learning. But especially there are those distancing points, the different points. Well, what I mean is that the difference between private and public, for example, in terms of media literacy. We criticize always here in Brazil, we are very engaged in the discussion that it's necessary, it's crucial for schools, especially elementary and secondary schools, to develop what we call a media literacy in schools. We see that in several countries, but unfortunately we don't see that in Brazil. I'm not sure if all my colleagues and people who are watching will agree with that, but it's pretty much difficult to, especially online education, to develop that because of what we call a negationism, something people who are always denying technology in education. And unfortunately here in Brazil, especially in elementary and secondary education, technology is not or was not a reality before pandemic. So something that COVID-19 provoked here in Brazil, especially in public schools, was this sort of technological exploration, and with some exceptions. But I think that the feeling between, talking about students, this feeling and this social practice, making difference what is public, what I should mention, what I should post on internet, and especially some very basic information. Is it true? Is it fake? Talking about fake news. And this is really a tough mission here in terms of education here in Brazil. So that's why we as educators fight and actually talk about technology as empowering people. What does it mean to empower people? And I think it's pretty much important to say that. So people lack this reading skill, reading online and understanding what's real, what is fake. I think just to conclude and to summarize this in terms of media literacy, it's something in terms of outcome, it would be very important to explore and to qualify in our schools and even in teacher education programs.
Absolutely. Even the assessment is quite challenging in the virtual environment, I would say. Obi, so have you noticed the change in the learning outcomes of students or challenges in assessing that?
You see, I often use a computerized, assessment test, like a person speaking or OPIC speaking test, So whether we are using a sort of online class or sometime face-to-face, I used to use this computerized speaking test, before treatment and after the treatment. So I could check, how much they're progressing. But I have 4 specific purposes in my teaching. First one is that to develop student higher order thinking skills and worldviews. And second one is that to acquire 21st century skills to prepare for digitalized societies. The third one is to acquire more cross-culturally sensitive understanding by ICT and to develop a CQ, cross-cultural quotient, IQ. And so in order to carry out these purposes, I think whether we are teaching online or person to person, there isn't much difference, but it's hybrid teaching would be more ideal, But still the online, I could carry out these 3 main specific purposes. And the student could be more exposed to interact with people from foreign countries. And if we carry out the lesson online, from overseas, the people could come in easily, And every other week or sometime every 3 weeks, I invited the 9 Campus Crusade student, also the young people, to come to my virtual classroom. So the student may prepare the presentation about 10 important subjects facing our 21st century, society. And the student did a preparation, and then they made a presentation just in front of CCC members. So this way, they could, really develop their cognitive mind through discussion and presentations, And at the same time, the CCS members use a particular software to assess the student performance of presentation, So I think still now the online teaching would be very effective. So depends on what the pedagogy is all about and how you're going to teach, And we could have more advantage to invite from overseas, That's one advantage, I think, when we do some online teaching. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Klerr, I'm curious to this point because we all have been through this virtual environment as students, teachers, or for work. What I found really that keep me motivated and keep my focus is when I'm engaged and when there is some dynamics happening in the process. So how does Quipper Philippines, or what would you suggest? What are your ideas to increase the engagement in the digital classroom between students and teachers?
Well, thank you for that, sir. And anyway, I who also had experienced the transition of traditional to new normal of teaching, and I who is currently now a specialist of an educational technology company, I really can say that these interactions, engagements between teachers and students really change. First is, of course, the inclusivity of resources. Everyone today can really have an easy access to any educational context. And even in our platform, speaking of, we had a ready-made content, they really can access through it and download these study guides. They really have this easy access to that, and which are really highly available to them, whether in internet or whether in our platform. And moreover, with the schools opening an open access to learning, especially with the use of learning management system like us, students may just stay at home and no need to go physically in schools, then study online and get still a degree. Second, there are more vivid learning materials and demonstrations. Students nowadays can have this online field trip to any part of the world, and within our platform, teachers can really embed other interactive softwares. And on the other end, with regards to the use of an LMS, for example, teachers can really integrate more context, which are highly relevant and timely at the same time. Thirdly, getting more communication channels. With the use of internet, email, social media, communication between teachers and our learners has never been really this synchronous. And as to Quipper, we also have this what we call messaging feature, where there is a teacher to class communication, teacher to student and a student to teacher as well. More so, this messaging feature is widely used for forums, discussion forums or discussion threads for any relevant topic that they have. I think thus collaboration to between teachers and students is just around their fingertips.
Thank you very much, Klerr. Wow, you're so passionate about technology. You almost made me fall in love with it. Okay, so I'm gonna twist this a little bit and ask students, what do you find to work best for you in the classroom to keep you engaged in the online class? What techniques, maybe softwares, technology that your professor are using that you would like to share with us? Maero?
Hi. So actually it depends on the size of the class also, because there are classes wherein you have just 20 people, 20 students, and then there are classes where you have hundreds. So it's kind of challenging, but I salute my professors who were able to give us a sense of interaction with each other. I found that one of the most important things that I see fit when it comes to engaging students would be discussion polls. So in the middle of the lecture, they would ask a question wherein students can answer the question by answering the polls or the annotating tool. Say, for example, in Zoom, they would have a screen wherein everyone can answer by annotating. So it keeps us engaged to the topic. And even if it's, let's say, a long lecture wherein in the middle of it, the professor would ask something like a quick check. Are you still there? Are you still listening? So that's one thing. And also I would say if they post or embed videos like in the middle of the lecture also, and breaking us into small groups, discussion groups or breakout rooms, and speak with our peers. So those ones would really help us to be engaged in the topics.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maero, for sharing. Maria?
Hi, Vladimir. Yeah, I am loving the conversation, and I kind of want to add into the whole idea of equitable technology at the end of my sort of part. But as a student, I found that learning, virtual learning has become very individualistic, and it's really pushing students to take on leadership roles within the classroom. Because as Maero was pointing out, I find that breakout rooms can be very helpful, but only if students put in that effort to make it engageable. And I find that a lot of times that's not happening just because, as was pointed out before, there's a lot of students just with their cameras off, really not engaged. So I would say, yeah, for students, there's a need to take on that leadership role and really make the effort to chat with other students. As well, I found that, yeah, I love the annotating feature on Zoom. I found that that's a great way to sort of break the ice and just get everyone to really be affective with learning. And I think that's a great start. On top of that, I found that websites such as Mural has been really fun, a little bit challenging to navigate for people that are not really too into tech, but those sorts of platforms have allowed students to get a little bit more creative with their education. And so I think those were some of the really great tools that we can use in virtual classrooms. As well, I think virtual sort of tours. In my history classes, we've been taken to museums over the last 2 years just virtually. And I think that having that shared experience makes it a lot more enjoyable rather than just sort of, seeing a PowerPoint happening. And just touching on the equitable education and technology part, I kind of wanted to point everyone's attention to there's these boat schools in Bangladesh. And I think it really points out that technology access is still very, it's not the same for everybody. Like the global north and the global south are experiencing a really different sort of reality of access to technology in education. And so I think there's a really great, crossover happening where, as Klerr was saying, there's programs and companies that are helping students and teachers bridge that gap. But it's something that I find is very interesting, and I would love to continue talking on, is that idea of finding groups of people or communities that don't have access to technologies and figuring out how we can make that more accessible, sort of giving them the necessities to technology. Because of course, virtual class tours, stuff like that, I feel like is almost the cherry on top of virtual learning. But just the basics is something that's really lacking. Yeah, and I think as a student, I'm really happy to see all these tools come in to make it a lot more engageable.
Absolutely. Equity in the access to technology is definitely a huge challenge, especially in the geographical south, as you mentioned, and we will come back to this topic in a bit. James, are there any tools, any experience that you would like to share that you found useful?
Yeah, so the tools that Maria and May mentioned, they were all great, and I personally believe as well. One just to add on, I think one of the tools that has been very impactful, not just for me, but I noticed just for the class in general, is the chat function on Zoom or on other platforms. I assume they have something similar. I just noticed that even when comparing like class in person versus class online, there's a lot more participation with the chat function. A lot more students are more willing to ask questions, and there's even at times it kind of like breaks out into like discussions within the students while the teacher is instructing their lesson. So I think even with the chat function itself, I think it's a very impactful tool that could just help the education experience in general. And even with talking to some educators, I've noticed that they're actually attempting to place that chat function into the in-person environment as well. I'm not too sure how the most viable way to pursue that, but I just noticed that because it seems that even the educators realize how the chat function could be so like impactful and beneficial to the student learning.
Thank you, James. What is really interesting to me, I was looking at my 5-year-old nephew the other day. He just did this on some phone. I'm not even name the phone. I wouldn't even be able to turn it on. But then he, got what he wanted. He's watching the video, what he wanted. And as I said, I wouldn't even know how it would take me forever to use that particular operating system. And in this regard, and Klerr, I want to ask you first this question. Do you notice a generational gap between the technology users, and do you think the older generations like me can keep pace with the needs, learning needs, and interests of the younger generations in terms of adopting technology?
The impact of technology in education and as a whole really is undeniably inevitable, from how we actually learn down to how we are being assessed and how we are talking, especially in these times. These are mostly through the aid of technology. But I would like to first take it for the students' perspective before I go to the teachers or educators one. Because of technology, students, when you say outcomes, their outputs and performances are more varied, are more creative, and more innovative at the same time. Varied in the sense that through the use of it, there is a sense of options, what specific outputs should they actually have. And it's not alone now one-dimensional or pen and paper, and even performance-based outputs are highly affected by the aid of technology. Actually, what I had observed is that students nowadays are really good in creating videos, in creating vlogs, in creating websites, having interactive presentations, answering digital forums, digital sketches, and even the likes. And they tend to be this creative because given the fact that because of this technology, sources have been undeniably open to all, highly accessible to anyone. And since they have this vast amount of resources that may help in creating, in completing tasks, for example, their outputs were so created that we cannot even imagine how they actually did it. And for of course, for teachers as well, because of the paradigm shift, because of pandemic, they also tend to be creative. I guess technology is not really discriminatory on what generation you belong. It sometimes it is about how you cope with the challenges, how you go forward. It's always been moving forward. It's not we have chance to turn back, but it's always acceptance that we have to embrace this new normal teaching. And that is why we have to be innovative in the sense that we go beyond what is currently existing and produce something out of it, because we have to love exploring and finding new ways from our conventional ways. And why do we have this? Why we need this? Because I think technology should give a sort of motivation as a whole, regardless of what generation you belong. It provides interest somehow. And when we have this interest, it empowers us. And when we are empowered, we do a lot of things. We do a lot of creative things, sir.
Absolutely beautiful, Klerr. Thank you so much. Obi, I know you are the expert in educational technology, but have you noticed any challenges that your colleagues are going through, have been going through since the pandemic with adapting new technology and transferring it to the virtual environment?
Yes, maybe in our case at my university, I used to use AI and also the VR about 4 years ago. But the last year at the College of Economics, we decided to launch the new project using VR, targeting about 100 students. You know, these students are divided into two groups, 40 for non-VR user, 60 the VR user. You know, so those people who are seriously, you know, participating in the VR lesson, they made much progress. That's like CEFAL level, just jumped into from A2 to B1 level. It's a really good progress. Even the OPIC speaking test from level 6 to level 8, you know. So the student really thrilled to use a new technology. But I think science and technology will continue to advance further. And the technology has extended the reality of human augmentation to extend human capabilities. We are now living in the age of human augmentation, right? That's why in the field of education, AI, VR, AR, XR, those are being used for language learning. And also nowadays, big data is being used to analyze the history of learners and apply it to individualized learning. So the learning analytics should be introduced to the education. And sometime in the future, I'm a little bit scared that AI and big data may be going to replace some lazy teachers, those people who are not catching up with the latest technologies, you know. But coming back to the basics of education, why are we going to train the student? I think we have to have, you know, some certain policy to educate the student where we are using virtual learning or whatever the technology we are still using. And my basic principle is how to train the higher order thinking skills or creative skills, you know, and then let the student find out the real meaning of life. I think we have to always keep coming back to the basics where we are using technology or just in person to person, you know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Obi. Fabiana, how about you? Have you noticed a gap between teachers and students in the adoption of technology?
Yes, yes, pretty much. I think everyone would say that in a certain extent, or to a certain extent. And you know that I agree with my panel colleagues here, because it's something really, really challenging. And the point I'd like to mention in terms of this gap, Vladimir, is, and talking about your nephew, I think you mentioned him or her, and it's actually something really crazy when we consider a few years ago. And when it comes to using technology, this generation, and I don't like stereotypes, alpha generation or Z generation, but this generation from people who were born in the last decade, probably, if we pay attention, they are not using technology or trying to learn about technology. They are learning, and they are actually engaging in the world through technology. So they are acting in terms of environment, or how to get the world better, or world peace, etc., through technology without thinking. So it's something that, as Vygotsky says, if we consider, Vygotsky didn't mention ICT, Vygotsky didn't mention technology in education, but if we consider technologies as cultural instruments, actually it makes sense when we talk that they interfere not only in the cultural atmosphere, in the cultural practices or social practices, but also cognitive, biological ones. So that's what, when I talk about empowering people, and your nephew is actually empowered in the sense that I'm mentioning here. And unfortunately, when we talking about here within Brazil, but actually around the world, there are several communities and countries where children and youngs, they don't have this opportunity. So I agree with you when you say here in our panel that we must do that as educators and as researchers. So I agree that, for example, in our classes, chat function works much more in my classes, for example, and e-learning research has proved that in terms of emotional skills, etc. People try to feel better talking with their cameras off instead of showing their faces, for several reasons. So I think that be-learning is actually, when you associate be-learning with the so-called active methodologies, I think it works much more better than when you only use technology without thinking about your methods.
Absolutely. And while you were talking, you reminded me of a few more points that you know, my nephew also taught me, but I'm sure that all of us can see that in our own environments. The children just learn so much more and much faster than we did. Like for example, my nephew, before he was 3, he already learned to speak several languages. He learned to write and read in English before he was 2, and many more things. You know, even I mean, counting numbers, of course, but even the mathematical operations that I started learning when I was 8, you know, children already know that. And to this point, if you know, the curriculum that students are taught in schools is outdated or not relevant, I guess there is no technology that could keep them engaged and motivated to stay in class. So that is a whole new problem that we are facing here, and we have discussed in previous sessions in this conference. But you gave me a great idea to ask students here. So what do you think about the relevance of what you are taught in the curriculum at the university in terms of keeping you motivated? We also have discussed, you know, a huge dropout rates from schools across the world. In developed countries, surprisingly very high. So one of those, one of the factors was actually the outdated curriculum and curriculum that is not relevant at all. So Maria, I will start with you first. I see that you are nodding.
Hi, Vladimir. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. I have some points to touch on. With curriculum, I've noticed that, yes, some classes are using outdated curriculums, and I see that happening. Like, I see the evidence for it when professors, I think, weekly are trying to take student feedback or reflections or check-ins. And on the one hand, it's of course valuable information, but it also makes me realize in a in-person setting that didn't really happen. And so if this many, check-ins are necessary throughout a virtual classroom, how many are actually really necessary even within an in-person classroom? So that was something that I started thinking about, and I realized that of course there's a lack of sort of personable learning, but at the same time, I think especially at the university level, learning is very much an independent thing. And within, like, let's say 100 people, 100 students classroom, that sort of student-professor relationship can become a little bit worn out if there aren't that many reflection points throughout the semester. As well, I was going to talk about sort of how technology is being used for students. I know that before the pandemic sort of hit, there was technology in my learning, but I wasn't really aware of it in the way that I am now. And I've also really reverted back to the pre-existing technologies. So for example, because, I can't really go to in-person language learning classes, I've been using Duolingo to catch up on my French. And I think that's something that I wouldn't have considered if the pandemic wasn't here. Similarly with Zoom, it's been around for a very long time, but we were really, really honing in on the benefits of Zoom right now in a pandemic. And as a student as well, I feel like, yeah, I was kind of just born into, with my age, like this new normal of technology, but technology is advancing really, really fast. And I don't think, at least like people in my age group, are able to catch up with all of the intricacies that come with technology in education. So for example, Dr. Obari was mentioning big data, and there's lots of sort of privacy issues with that, and even biases within AI. And I think as students, I've had a really amazing class with Professor Leslie Chan. He taught technology and development, and we were able to take a look at how as students, we can protect our own privacy while at the same time contributing to technology in education and in development.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria. Mira, what about you?
Hi. So when it comes to the curriculum right now, when you're thinking about it, Maria has emphasized a lot of great points. And as she was saying, there are some things when you learn in the classroom and then you go out to the real world and you figure out, oh no, this is not the same thing that I was picturing it, because I was taught a different thing and then now I'm in a practical setting and it is different. But I would say maybe even if it is that way, the way that you are trained in a university level course, for example, so you build on the responsibility, you build on time management, you build on other skills that you can actually use in order to prepare you for the real world. I guess that's one important thing. And now when it comes to technology, there are so many things that students are now doing. Say, for example, a teacher or a professor is teaching you something, and there are times wherein it might not be the best way to learn it. So other students would instead use another platform, let's say watch another video to learn that particular topic. So I guess it's still an individualized way of adapting to it. So you kind of use whatever you are presented with, you use it to your advantage. And if it works for you, then good. And then if not, I guess it's a personal thing that you find ways on how you actually cope up with whatever is going on. So if the curriculum works for you, then good. If not, you have the voice to speak with your professors, because at the end of, let's say, a semester, there are surveys, there are questionnaires that you can answer, and then you're allowed to say whether did this course help you? Is there anything that you suggest to make it better? Or is there anything that you want to keep for the next classes? So yeah.
Thank you so much, Maero. James, what keeps you engaged in the virtual classroom?
What keeps me engaged? I think setting up and like a proper like schedule. First off, I think that's what I think it kind of like adds to keeping me engaged. But for me personally, I think although with the internet and with technology, it could be like very beneficial since that it provides more like nuance when it comes to learning. For instance, maybe if you want to show a video or YouTube video about a given subject, or maybe you kind of struggle to read, and you prefer having like an audio of that version, I think that's very beneficial. But when it comes to engagements, I think it could also be, the internet could also be like very distracting as well, especially when if you have like a lot of tabs open, or even with your phone so like next to you. So I think when it comes to online learning and for engagement, what really helps me is closing like all my tabs, especially the ones that may cause me to be distracted, putting my phone away from me, and really just focusing on the material and what the professor is saying. And also sometimes the chat function can be a little too distracting if the discussion goes a little off topic to the main point that the professor is making. So sometimes I turn off the chat notifications. So for me, what keeps me engaged is really just turning off like all possible distractions and really focusing on the material.
Thank you, James. Obi, your favorite topic? I would say again, seeing how fast children learn, even before they come to school, they learn many stuff that they are supposed to learn there. So in a way, it looks to me that the traditional model of education is in a way losing relevance, having the information readily available to everyone thanks to technology. But it seems also that we are threatened to lose our critical thinking abilities and virtues that you emphasized many times, even during this discussion, like empathy, compassion, gratitude, respect. So how do you think technology can be used to teach critical thinking skills and to promote the virtues?
Okay, I think I have to refer to the Vygotsky's social constructivism, and in my case, the dialogue or interaction with Campus Crusade people, you know. And Vygotsky's social cultural theory of human being, which describes learning as a social process and the origination of human intelligence in society or culture. And human development is socially situated. Right now, the student, human development is digitally and socially situated. So the digital social interaction plays a fundamental role in the development of cognition, and the knowledge is constructed through interaction with others in a digital environment. in the Vygotsky's age, he didn't think about this kind of a digital interaction, So now that we have a challenge, whether the student could develop the cognitive mind or not. And I always refer to the Dr. I just, gave you the handout, slide number 14. Philosophy of science. Dr. Halle, he has been my mentor for 20 years since I went to Oxford. And we have to, find out something new, which we may not be able to observe by using a particular instrument, And we usually come to grips with the new things by observation, by analogy, and by hypothesis. And mainly the people are concerned about the Liam 1 and Liam 2 areas by observation, by analogies. However, the things are not discovered yet, about maybe more than 90%. That's why we try to hypothesize the things to, find out some new discovery. The things we cannot observe or perceive, whatever the instrument we use, even including mental, religious, or spiritual matters, And that's why the Nobel laureate, they try to build up, some particular instrument to find out the invisible. Even the Professor Koshiba, he's a Nobel laureate in physics. He tried to build a Kamiokande in order to see the invisible, said Professor Koshiba, And so in order to find out something new, we have to develop our worldview thinking and also higher order thinking skills, But I am doing some research how we could develop our higher order thinking skills, also the cognitive skills in a digitalized society. Nobody has answered yet, That's a very important issue. I think I will stop it here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, but I will come back to you shortly because we need to dive deeper into this topic. I believe it seems to me, I don't want to discourage anyone from getting educated and pursuing more and more high degrees, but what it seems to me with this technology that those specific job, like the bigger expert you are, it looks like you will be more easily replaced by technology in the future. What will not be easily replaced is critical thinking and virtues that we were talking about. So Fabiana, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you. I think Professor Obari and I share in a way the same theoretical view in terms of education. I think Vygotsky's contribution is huge to understand this scenario of technological education. And following our panel title, The Power of Technology and Impactful Ways to Use It, I strongly believe that one of the powers of technology, or ICT, as I mentioned, is to empower people to actually act within society, and also this scenario of innovation within the educational field. And in terms of social, professional, and academic, talking about higher level skills, it's essential for subjects, for students, for teachers, considering formal learning environments. And I think it's important to consider when we refer to school, when we refer to university, it's crucial to understand schools, or what's the role of this institution, school, and university, or teacher education programs, talking about intellectual development. So I strongly believe that students, academic, university students, or talking about school scenario, they must experience something for educational purpose, for academic purposes, because we have also a scenario that students are coming to university without those literacy elements. They date online, they listen to songs, they watch movies, but when it comes to study and to interact for educational purposes, they lack some skills. So I strongly believe that, because when we consider multimodality, TPAC framework, artificial intelligence, computational thinking, and they are concepts which are being associated to innovation in education, and as competencies or skills necessary for the 21st century. But my question is it innovation a synonym to creativity? To which extent, as educators, are we providing creativity or creative scenarios within our classes, with or without technology? It doesn't matter. So I strongly believe with Antonio Novoa, who is a Portuguese, a very known investigator, as Wurt, a new Vygotskian researcher, and when they say that innovation must be aligned with a change in the established order. So this intellectual part must be underlying educators' choices in terms of methodologies and etc., especially within this scenario.
Absolutely. Klerr, yeah, we obviously all see how much impactful technology can be and how helpful it can be for us to learn more and faster. But what we did also emphasize in previous sessions as well is that the irony is that we seem to have more educated people than we have ever had before. And you would think that it will be a more harmonious society, but we see more conflicts, less empathy, more environmental destructions. So how do you think technology can be used to develop, not only to get educated people in terms of memorizing the information and having skills to do a job, but how can it be used to develop critical skills, critical thinking skills, and empathy, compassion, gratitude, and respect?
Well, for that, sir, I would really take that in a broader aspect and a broader perspective. We really cannot argue that every day we have constant engagement to our phones, to our desktops, laptops, and other internet-based devices. And these activities are really becoming the norm. And then many researchers out there that says prolonged exposure to these devices has changed the way we actually process information. I'm talking about people as a whole, learners, the educators, everyone. And just like how, of course, our learners nowadays think and learn, for example, children, their attention span has really decreased. And the way they get information is like always on the run. It's always somehow selective, quick scanning and processing this amount of information that they have. Because many researchers would really tell us with this prolonged engagement to devices to children may really affect the way they actually think, well, and in their brain development. But in a positive sense, probably, technology allows them soon to really think critically and participate in collaborative problem-solving activities. So to take it from my perspective as an educational company, we have to provide features to let our teachers do this, honing in of their critical thinkings to their students. We have to provide them features on our portal to help them create highly relevant context, more vivid context, more interactive assessment, somehow more realistic somehow. Because more than the platform, as in for Quipper, we also make sure that we provide holistic support to our educators. This is what I'm saying a while ago, that we provide free pedagogical trainings to really help them out. It's not just about technology. It's not just about us providing the system that they have to use, but of course helping them out reach that gap. Like providing them series of workshops that would really help them be more critical. Because it's all, when I talk about assessment, I happen to remember one of my professors. He says, if you wanted to have, as an educator, if you wanted to have quality of answers, it always begin with quality of questions. So for Quipper, we have to make sure that our educators really maximize our platform to make use of quality assessments.
Thank you so much, Klerr. Yeah, that's another huge challenge that I also see. While the information is available more than it has ever been before, and you would think that, you know, it would support the ability of one to think critically. I do notice, you know, that there is a lot of censorship there, at the same time online. We don't rely on books or conversations with people that much anymore. We have one or two sources that we visit, and even you know, the algorithms on social media for different people, they promote different content that really, in a way, and that was really you know, interesting to me to see, because I mean, I don't really, I mean, into politics, and I see no difference between any option really. But what is interesting that I get one content, and some other people get completely different content, and they never get the content that I get. So yeah, I see a lot of problem there, and it's completely different, you know. So it can also serve, you know, to polarize people, and even to kill critical thinking abilities. But yeah, it's definitely how we use that. Thank you very much, Klerr. Obi, I will come back to you shortly. I just want to ask students first, what is that you think is currently missing, and you would like to see that being taught at universities? James, I'll start with you. It can be or technology that you would like to see there, or
yeah, sure. So I think I alluded to this with my first answer, and I think finding a way to kind of like incorporate like the chat function that we see onto Zoom into the classroom, and maybe I could elaborate more on this now, because I think a lot of the times, even with, yeah, well, in Canada, I'm not too sure about around the world, but with a participation grade that's within the class, a lot of it is strictly based on the kind of like just like the vocal and just like the speaking aspect of participation. But I think there, from the past 2 years being online learning in an online environment, and even for educators teaching in an online environment, I think everyone has realized that participation is not just speaking, but it could also be through interacting with kind of like online without speaking, because I've really noticed that when compared even pre-pandemic, there were a lot less people willing to participate, maybe for various reasons. Maybe perhaps they were a little nervous with speaking in a large room with people. But within the online environments, it provides the students kind of like a way to participate, but without having the kind of like the anxious feeling that someone may have when speaking in public. So I think one aspect that could be really beneficial is trying to incorporate that like chat function, or maybe something similar into the in-person learning environments, because I think it'll provide the students more of an opportunity to participate.
Absolutely, great point, James. Maero?
Yeah. So when it comes to technology, what else needs to be incorporated? I just kind of thought something about student assessment. So when it comes to academic integrity, for example, I'm not sure how other universities do it, but there are certain quizzes, for example, that needs to be done online. And honestly, how are you able to, as professors, how are you able to identify if that particular answer is really thought about by the student, or is it something that they just took from a specific source? Because right now you can have multiple devices in front of you and just type in a keyword and then you get everything, right? So thinking about the topics that we were saying a while ago, like critical thinking skills. So I would say if they can think about ways on how to assess student learning instead of just asking those objective questions and grade a student based on those answers. Say, what is this? What is that? That you can easily type in a search engine and then it will give you the answer without even studying for it. So maybe one way to enhance that assessment would be to ask questions that are more of, I would say, require a student to analyze and think critically instead of just grading a student objectively. And that requires, because memorization, I believe, is one of the lowest forms of learning, because it's you're just going to memorize stuff, right? And sometimes you're not even memorizing, because then you're just typing it in one other device and then you get the answer. So yeah, one way would be to incorporate those questions, and or maybe when students are doing online quizzes or online tests, that screens are monitored. So what else are opened, what other screens are there. It might be more complex to think about it right now, but yeah, when it comes to what else needs to be included, I think that's one thing.
Absolutely, and yeah, I love that you mentioned that mentioned assessments. I also noticed it's or we even get the answers like in the quiz, who wants to become a millionaire, and the answer is obvious. You don't even have to think, let alone think critically and show that you understand the matter rather than only memorize. Yeah, and I also noticed that. So I really wonder how teachers are able to truly assess the students' knowledge. So Maria, Haque, what do you think would help promote more critical thinking skills?
Yeah, I agree with everything that James and Maero said. I also think in terms of the mode of delivery that we offer in online classes right now, we've been given, and I've been really happy with the way that U of T, like Scarborough campus, has sort of handled their virtual learning. Professors have given students opportunities to choose. So for example, we have an option to either submit weekly responses to readings, or we have an opportunity to get our participation grade through attending. It's a like a global climate change conference, and it's over the course of a month. So I think providing students with these options, even in person, allows them to be, at least for me, I felt like I'm a lot more engaged with my learning. And as well, I would say in the selection of like the offerings that they provide in terms of courses we can take, when we're more aware of the technologies that we're using, I think we become, in a way, automatically a little bit more honest in the work that we're providing. So for example, we use a web platform called Kurtz for our educational courses to access them. And there's little things in Kurtz, for example, they track how long you're on the website or who you're visiting, etc., stuff like that. I think having courses where we're taught how the technology we're interacting with works will help us be more aware of it. And in the long term, for example, like, how are we being assessed? It could give us we're not so much in the dark, so we don't feel like we can get away with, for example, academic dishonesty. So I think, yeah, just more awareness and more choice for students to be able to be active in their learning.
Thank you, Maria. I can't believe that we are almost at the end. We do have time for one more question. So what I will do, Obi, I would like you to dive a little bit deeper in the message that you started sharing in the previous round. So how can we use technology or let's do it like this. In your opinion, what are the greatest challenges or dangers, or in the negative scenario, or and also in the positive scenario, what do you see as how can technology be used to promote humanity in the future?
Okay. I think there's always reverse side of the coin, good point and bad points, you know. And for the future education in using ICT or computer, one famous professor mentioned, Professor Sato. He used to be a professor at the Tokyo University. He commented as follows, you know. A good use for computer in education is to be one of the stationery like pencils and erasers, you know. And the people nowadays are quite accustomed to use, you know, very complicated technologies, whatever is available. So that the technology should be, you know, means as a communication. And also the best and the final form is for the new corona to become one of the wins in the computer and the ICT education to become one of the stationaries. I wish, you know, people could be using computer like this, you know. And coming back to the critical thinking, and I'd like to say a few words, you know, in order to develop a critical thinking, the pedagogy is very important, like a higher order thinking skill should be developed if you use a flipped learning and the PBL project or CBL or TBL or task-based, you know. But in Oxford, tutorial is very famous in one-to-one interaction. So I try to imitate that kind of a tutorial method, inviting some foreign people, young people, and I gave about 10 important issues from the Oxford Martin School. If you look at the Oxford Martin School, this is the most famous institute where the researchers and the very top-notch scientists, they get together to solve some certain scientific issues, you know. So I asked my student to go and surf around and then listen to the videos and also think about something difficult issues that hasn't been solved yet, you know. And after they, you know, get together to hypothesize some certain issues, and they have to use a methodology to come up with a good solution. And they have to make a presentation in front of the young CCS from overseas. And this way, from tutorial discussion and interaction, they could develop a higher order thinking skills. I gave a sort of a questionnaire lastly, 7 C's, and from critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and the career learning, 7 C's, you know. And about a student seem to master about 80% in each skills, even in the under the circumstances of the digital, you know, learning environment, you know. So depends on the pedagogy is how you're going to train the skills and also how you find out a new discovery, just like I mentioned in the Professor Harry's, you know. That's what I want to say, you know, first. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Obi. Fabiana, what is the future of technology and humanity?
Oh my God, yes. It's a little bit difficult to answer exactly, but of course, it's important talking about, especially in what I mentioned as a formal education scenario or context. First of all, it's really important not to consider technology or ICT as in an isolated way. So one discipline within the curriculum, for example, to talk about technology or to talk about cyber culture. I think the future, when it comes for curriculum in universities and even in schools, is to consider technologies as what we are studying for decades as cognitive tools, actually to consider, and we came up to that conclusion, reading and investigating that. When you consider technology as a cognitive tool, it's in terms of Vygotsky again, technologies are our intellectual partners. So we learn with technology, we learn through technology, and also we learn about technology. So this instrumental part is only one part, it's not the most important one. So associating that new reality, and I'm not sure exactly if it's new, but it's something different, to innovation in education. It's only one of the consequences for subjects in general, for all of us, teachers, educators, people in general, human beings, and urgently demand new methodology. So when you talk about PBL, project-based learning, problem-based learning, these new quotation please, methodologies or active methodologies, I think the new part is exactly or precisely the technological one. So actually, yes, it's crucial for educators to consider that for those who still do not consider. And when we talk about new perspectives, new methodologies, we are talking about new planning or different planning, assessing. So it's a completely different way to consider, especially when I strongly believe that be-learning, so this hybrid scenario with your teacher and without him or her, it's something that expects us from the future, artificial intelligence, computational thinking. So it's all together when you consider education.
Absolutely, thank you. Klerr, what is the future of technology and humanity? Give us some really bright and positive scenario for the final message.
Oh, well, I agree with Professor Obari. Everything we do, there is always yin and yang, or like always with pros and cons. And as much as we wanted to narrow these possibilities, when everything is too much, it's really dangerous. And when everything is too low, still it's still dangerous. So with regards to the challenges, we talk about over-reliance, we may talk about over-dependence to it. And what would really happen if we over-rely on technology? I think rather than technology as seen as a partner, I believe we became slaves of it. Slaves in a sense that we may tend to highly depend on everything from it. Like we cannot do anything on this, do simple and basic daily activities without the use of any of these devices. And that is why there is actually technology dependence, which has been linked to anxiety and depression. And more than the effect of our mental health with such over-reliance, there are other vital factors which really affect us, including our learners. Yes, we come to the point that we all know the importance of technology and education, and as a whole, what it provides, what these advantages, what to both learners and educators. And as we know for sure, the toll of overusing it and the over-reliance in it. I would just like to strike a simple message to that. Well, if we treat technology as a sort of partner, from that we can assess the roles of technology in our daily lives as well as our roles, humans, to technology. Granted that we have this vast amount of opportunities, vast amount of technology, different kinds of technology, but if we are not responsibly resourceful in using all this vast amount, all these opportunities probably will really turn into waste. I think it boils down into this major question, this major challenge. How do we really strike a balance with the use of technology as a whole? I think it's always with the manner, like the how and the why. Those are the things that I firmly believe we need to consider in using technology to serve humanity best.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Klerr. Absolutely. Using technology as a partner, having the balance, not over-relying on anything because it's the certain way to forget everything. We came to the end and we only scratched the surface, but we can keep and should keep this discussion going on in the Who app. Obi, thank you for sharing this. We will certainly add that in Whova, and we are looking forward to continue the discussion there. So thank you, our insightful panelists, and we see you all for the next session. Thank you.